Streaming live from Oklahoma's own digital studio, this is Jeremie Poplin with an Oklahoma Sports Spotlight.
Well, it is an Oklahoma Sports Update, but a little bit of a breaking news edition as we welcome you into the digital desk. My name is Jeremie Poplin. We have a special guest that will join us here in just a few seconds. But first, we'll break in after a holiday weekend. Big news to kick off your Monday, and that is Joe Castiglione news at the University of Oklahoma. Pete Thamel, the first report from ESPN.com, that Joe C., apologize as this is so new, have to look at your notes, will retire from his full-time role during the upcoming school season, bringing an end to the longest tenured run for a current AD in major college sports. According to those sources at ESPN, you can check out our work at news9.com right now. So let's bring in the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners. He is Toby Rowland, who's joining us here on the digital desk. And Toby, I got to ask, man, coming off of a holiday weekend, how big of a shock, how big of a surprise is this to you?
It's a surprise. I would say not a shocking surprise. Joe is 67 years old. Not that I had any idea necessarily this was coming, but I think we have speculated the last couple of years, especially considering everything that athletic departments in general have been through with the changing landscape of college sports these days, that maybe it was getting close to the time that Joe would decide to step aside. So I would say it didn't knock me over, but it certainly was not news I expected this morning.
Yeah, I think it's going to catch a lot of people by surprise. And when something like this happens, I try to go back through the Rolodex of moments where Joe C. was active in the public and had speaking parts, whether that be in certain interviews or even in big settings like the SEC announcement that happened just over a year ago now. There wasn't anything necessarily that stood out to me, but you did kind of get the sense, and maybe I'm making too much of this, that the big crowning moment, or one of the big items that Joe C. wanted to kind of hang his hat on, no pun intended, Joe, was the inclusion into the SEC and to have that celebration last year and the future of Oklahoma athletics taken care of from an athletic and an academic standpoint in a conference like the SEC. Does that kind of fall in line with what you think of what the overall legacy, part of the legacy of Joe C. actually is?
Yeah, I think that if it's not the first line, it'll be maybe the second line. Certainly one of the top two lines of his legacy at OU is that he led OU into the SEC and not only took care of them for all the reasons you mentioned, but financially as well with that move. You got to think back to when he came here was just before Bob Stoops started his tenure at OU. And not only was the football program not in good shape, but if you think back to what all of the athletic facilities looked like at that time and what they've been able to do from a brick and mortar standpoint on campus, what they have been able to do from a championships standpoint on campus. Of course, they got the one in 2000 with football, played for several others, but what Patty Gasso has done, what gymnastics has done, the Final Four runs for both basketball programs, it has been remarkable. And we have seen several of those polls the last few years where either athletic directors or media members are asked to rank the top athletic directors in America. And invariably, Joe Castiglione is number one. And, the first thing that I thought of when I saw the news this morning was who's next. And that'll be an interesting conversation because his tree is amazing. There's hardly an athletic department in America that isn't touched by a branch of the Joe Castiglione tree in some way. So it's going to be a fascinating few months ahead for OU.
You've had very unique opportunities to spend a lot of hours with Joe C., whether that be on the radio side or with your duties with broadcasting for the University of Oklahoma. To me, Joe has always kind of been the what you see is what you get type guy. Would you agree with that assessment with Joe? And what type of person is Joe Castiglione? Everyone just sees kind of the figurehead of OU athletics, but you've had the unique perspective of actually being around him in a more intimate setting.
Yeah, very measured is the first thing I think of. Doesn't jump to decisions quickly without giving it tremendous thought. As caring of an individual as I've ever worked under for making sure that not only are you doing your job, but you are happy in your home life and your family life and everything to make sure you can do your job at the highest level. He has a real understanding for the ability for everyone to perform at their highest level goes beyond just being at work. And I think that, there's you won't find, I can't imagine you'll find anyone who has ever worked for him that didn't love him dearly, doesn't love him dearly. So I think that he's done obviously an amazing job at OU. He has been a mover and shaker on the national scene, to say the least. And, a few years ago, I thought it was probably going to happen that he was going to be a conference commissioner, or maybe even, the next head of the NCAA. I mean, that's the kind of clout he has carried the last few years, the last decade, really, in college sports. And he very well could have. But I think he just decided that he wanted his legacy to be attached, and he loved it in Norman. He wanted his legacy to be attached to the University of Oklahoma, and was not necessarily hungry for that kind of a challenge at that time. So it's going to be interesting. A part of this Pete Thamel story was that he's going to kind of stay around in an emeritus role, which sounds a lot like what Bob Stoops has done with the football program. He's going to be around Norman. He's going to be, have a hand in everything. His advice is going to be sought. So it's not like he's going away, but it is certainly a day that sends heads spinning at the University of Oklahoma for sure.
So this will be going into his 28th year, 26 national titles, 117 league titles, the big move from the Big 12 to the SEC, which we talked about. But to me, in elements that you had mentioned previously, the success speaks for itself. It's the reputation that Joe carries with him amongst his peers. There's not an athletic director that you talk to anywhere in this country that does not speak of Joe Castiglione in anything but the highest terms possible. Every athletic director that I've been around, from Bubba Cunningham on to Justin Moore, who's the new athletic director at the University of Tulsa, they speak in such a way about Joe that, it's almost like he's the Don. And when you're around for that period of time and you have the success, I think a lot of that comes naturally, but it's so many of the other elements that factors into how Joe C is at least viewed in the athletic community to me, Toby.
Yeah. No, you're right. The Don is a good way of saying it. He is kind of the godfather of athletic directors out there. I could only speak to it personally from my perspective. Everybody has their different examples, but there are multiple nights a week, even currently, where driving home from the TV station, I'll get a call, and it'll be Joe, and he loves broadcasting. He considers himself, and he's right about it, one of the guys who has been most pivotal in broadcast hiring the last quarter century, really. He hired Joe Buck for the first time at Missouri. He hired Kevin Harlan for the first time. There's as many play-by-play voices and color analysts out there as there are athletic directors that Joe Castiglione is responsible for hiring. And he loves the medium. And so we'll have a 15, 20-minute chat on the way home from the TV station or wherever it'll be multiple nights a week, just about the game that night, about what's going on in family life, whatever the key. I think you can take my experience and multiply it across how many of 100 people work in the University of Oklahoma athletic department, and they would say the same thing. It feels like he's your best friend. And he really did a great job, has done a great job of investing in his people. And it's a tremendous example of leadership. Now, the challenge that he and all athletic directors have been faced with in the last couple of years, 5 years maybe to expand it that far, is unprecedented. And I think it's been challenging and frustrating at times. And he's not necessarily overly thrilled with where we find ourselves these days in the landscape of college sports. And whether or not all of that is added into this decision today, I don't know. I haven't talked to him. But I would think there's a pretty good chance that could be the case. But his legacy is certainly deep rooted, wide reaching, and nothing but positive.
Maybe we can start let's get a statue ready now for Joe C, because if there's anyone that deserves a statue on that campus, it would be Joe Castiglione, to add to those that have already been put in place. Final one that I have for you, you briefly mentioned this next year, how many ever months that it takes for them to decide who's the next successor to Joe Castiglione. That's going to be fascinating to watch because the tree is massive. There's a lot of branches on that. You could go to virtually every corner in every athletic department in this country and find some type of connection. But those are some big shoes that whoever they decide to fill that spot, that's a tall task, at least in my opinion, to take over the reins at one of the largest athletic departments in the country.
It's a tall task, but it's a great job. And there'll be the line to be next will be long. And obviously, he'll be heavily involved in making that decision. This happened minutes ago. The three names that have immediately jumped to mind for me are Zach Selman at Mississippi State. Kirby Hocutt at Texas Tech is a Joe Castiglione disciple who has obviously done a great job out there and been creative, especially in the last few years with how he's handled NIL and everything. Michael Alford is at Florida State right now. Michael Alford was a part of the athletic department under Joe, major part of getting Owen Field renovation done before he went on to Central Michigan and then on now to Florida State. So those are the first three names that pop to mind. I think there'll be a lot of, at least among Sooner fans, support for Zach Selman. I know he hasn't been at Mississippi State very long, so his track record as an AD isn't necessarily very long, but he was very popular when he was here, and he's a Selman, and everybody loves Zach. So that, I think, will be the name that you hear a lot today bantied about. But, I just mentioned three names. I could mention 30, 40 more that are athletic directors right now at Division I institutions and will be considered for the position.
Toby, I know this is short notice. I appreciate your time jumping on the digital desk with us today. The fun part about this as well will be getting to honor Joe C for all of his accomplishments over the next several months as well. We will not take that lightly. I know that you will not either, and I cannot thank you enough for jumping on here very short notice.
My pleasure, Pop. Thanks.
That's Toby Rowland, the voice of the Oklahoma Sooners, joining us here on the digital desk. Thank you for tuning in as well and watching along on YouTube. We've got much, much more coming up for you over the next several days. Remember to check out the websites, news9.com, newson6.com as well. We'll have the latest for you on TV as well. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time from the digital desk.
Thank you for watching this Oklahoma Zone Digital Studio sports presentation. Stay with News on 6, online and on television anytime for the latest news, weather, and sports.